Well, let's move on to our first panel in the second half. This is very exciting to have the cast of behind the scenes of Orphan Black in creating a Clonespiracy. Yes, and so for the moderator today, we have a really wonderful guy. You probably know him as a star and producer of CBC's international hit comedy show, Little Mosque on the Prairie. He's also portrayed in the Deepa Mehta's film, Midnight's Children. He has traveled across Canada, the world, speaking on the power of arts and the media to foster greater understanding between Eastern and Western cultures. And now he's managed to squeeze us in, and he's in the ever-changing industry of this amazing city. This is an overachiever for sure. Please welcome Zabe Sheikh.
I can sit down. All right. Wow, it's a big room. Enjoy. Love it. Tatiana's everywhere. Hey everybody, how are you? Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Naomi. What's up, Kristian? Oh yeah, do it. We miss Tatiana. I'm going to give you, for those of you who are just new to the show, if you are, for those of you who are rabid fans of it, you know exactly who's sitting here. But for those of you who don't know, I'm going to read you the list of who we have. Then we're going to, just before we get into this amazing conversation, and these folks are backstage, they're laughing, they're chilling, they're reconnecting. So they are a great group. We're going to throw to a little bit of a trailer for season 4, get you all wetted your appetite, wet your whistle, as they say, and then we're going to get into the conversation.
Let's just get wet.
Let's just keep it. So we have Mr. Co-creator, executive producer, writer of Orphan Black, Graeme Manson. Give it up. We have Kerry Appleyard, who's an executive producer on the show, as well as being senior vice president, scripted programming at Temple Street Productions. We have Maria Doyle Kennedy, who plays Mrs. S, as you know, on Orphan Black. Ari Millen, Mark, Rollins, Rudy Miller, he plays them all, Orphan Black. Chris Roberts, who's also a writer and co-producer on the show. And then Kristian Bruun, who plays Donnie Hendricks on Orphan Black. All right, we're gonna have this conversation, but first, you wanna see something on the screen. Hit it.
Where the hell are you going?
Back to the beginning of all this. Are you crazy? You can't be here.
They're coming. They never tell me when things are bad, but I always know.
Hey, wait! Hey, wait!
Sarah.
Sarah! I need you to tell me that Delphine is alive. Piss off! You killed Aldous Leakey? Exactly. I have to tell my sister. I just want to blast something. Get out.
Well, now I'm confused.
Hey, who are you? You.
Orphan Black, new season, new night, premieres Thursday, April 14th at 10 on BBC America.
They're coming.
Get caught up. Full episodes at Amazon Video, bbcamerica.com, and on demand.
That accent's so cool. Woo! Exciting. That's hot stuff. I want to say, first of all, as the film commissioner and director of entertainment for the City of Toronto, we are super thrilled and proud to have this show in our city, and we just love it, and we're the lucky beneficiaries of such a great, successful show. So let's talk about it. Graeme, for those of us who may not know the backstory, can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of the show, and maybe even where did the idea come from?
The idea first fell off the lips of my partner, John Fawcett, who we had been colleagues and had worked together before. We went to the Canadian Film Centre here up in North York together, and
Alum in the house.
So we were looking for something to do together. We were looking for a feature concept at the time, something high concept. We were both into the sci-fi worlds. So John pitched the opening scene after, numerous attempts at figuring out what would be a cool movie. He pitched that opening scene where a girl gets off a train and she's ragged and on the run, and she looks across the tracks and she sees someone who looks exactly like her, and in that moment when their eyes meet, the doppelganger commits suicide. And from that moment on, we just were asking the questions: who was that? What happens next? And that really was sort of the same kind of thing that we wanted to create. We wanted to create something that you're in the first person's, right in the main character's shoes, that you're in a mystery. You don't know what's going to come at you next. We were really into that film Memento at the time. And actually, Orphan Black played with time travel, and it was a bad idea back when we were developing it. It's complicated enough. Don't add time travel.
Like back to Roman times or something like that?
John always wants to
Ancient
go to
Rome.
Roman times, yes. Yeah.
He wanted the
Togas and
original to be
sandals.
from the future at one point.
Yes, the original was going to be from the future. No. So that was the idea, and we got together and tried to create a story, and we had some great tent poles. We had our main characters, things that really survived, and then as a feature, we could never finish it. The story was too big. The mystery was too long. We couldn't wrap it up, so we ended up sort of shelving it for a while. Until, lo and behold, the Canadian Film Centre phoned again. This time, instead of to say, come as a student, to come as an instructor to run the television writers program.
Right.
One component of it, which is where they throw the writers into a writer's room type situation. They bring in a showrunner who develops their own concept at the film center with a room full of young and impressionable minds. So it was the thing that really allowed us to beta test that. And probably, if you're writers and filmmakers, procrastination is your worst enemy. So it stopped us procrastinating and put this idea back on the table in front of us. And by the time we got through it, we had really sort of tested the concept. We had a pilot script, and from there it wasn't a very long trip to Temple Street.
Nice, and let's talk about that. Actually, great segue. Thank you, Graeme. Kerry, how and when and what made, allowed, encouraged, inspired you and Temple Street to get involved, and what was that journey?
Well, I think the beginning was I arrived from the UK in 2009, and I think my first job there was head of development, and so I just had to meet all the writers and the talent here, and I'd heard a lot about this Graeme Manson character, so I knew how to meet him and corralled him to come in for just a general meeting, and he just casually told me he was working on the show and what he'd been doing at the CFC, and he pitched me the opening that he's just pitched you now. And it kind of sent shivers down my spine, and we talked a lot about it, and he talked about how it would be a clone show, and he had a pilot script for it, and I think he went off to his cabin and disappeared for about 6 weeks, and I sent him multiple emails asking him to send me the script. And I finally got my hands on the script and read it and thought it was brilliant, and it was really challenging because I didn't know how we would do it. I thought obviously there was a worry at the core of it that if we didn't cast it properly and produce it properly, it could just be a gimmick. And it wasn't the easiest thing to sell either. But, we were always up for the challenge, so we took it on. And, we worked a lot with John and Graeme and just kind of really, kept refining the pitch. And then what we tend to do is internally develop things and then get them ready to pitch to broadcasters. And we did that and pitched it out to Canada, pitched it all out to the US. Nobody wanted it. And so, I think it sat in a drawer for about 4 months, and then BBC America were kind of opening their original programming again.
I think it was 9 long months.
Actually, I think I actually had a baby in between. Yeah.
So then it must have
I
been
think that
at
it was
least 9
definitely
months.
9 months then. Yeah.
Unless you know something that the show's telling.
I think I was pregnant when we were pitching it, and then I went off and had a 6-month maternity leave and came back, and then we actually gave the script to BBC America. It just was stars aligning, and they were on board, and then we actually got a home for it in Canada, and the rest is history. Yeah. There were further kind of ups and downs and roller coasters where people were in and out, and it fell down, and. But
also, you told a few lies, didn't you? When we've talked a few times about how it came, and I remember one time Graeme kind of saying, and I think it was only because you were a bit tired one morning, so you were being slightly more frank than you would normally be. But you said that they really wanted 5 years, and you're going, we know we only have 3, so we'll just sort of give them 3 and we'll kind of spoof our way through the last 2 in case it gets that far. Like, really, I thought those kind of things are hilarious and that people actually do them and get away with it. Boom.
Yeah, it is all bullshit at that stage.
Well, I think we always had, I think in the pitch document we had season 2 and beyond. I think we kind of mapped out to season 3. And we always knew there was a lot of story juice, but yes, there's still that element of bullshitting your way through it at that stage.
Well, I guess it's probably going to change a lot, as you know, and obviously it has as we've gone from season to season. So you wouldn't necessarily, if you had a 4 or 5, it mightn't be true or real anyway by the time you get there.
No, that's, yeah, absolutely. Although, you know, there's a bunch of big sort of tentpole ideas in the larger concept of the series that have existed all the way through.
Stayed the same, yeah, and that haven't changed and stayed in the same position. The big kind of moments that kind of thrust you forward into the next season. You've always had those, and they've always kind of
we've
stayed.
always had those. And it was like, we knew we wanted an Ari before we knew Ari.
There you go, Ari. We're going to get to the cast, of course, and this is meant to be a free-form conversation for these folks here, and we'll get to questions later on, absolutely, from the crowd. Want to stick with just on the creative process, however you want to call that word. Chris, you started, interestingly enough, in season 1 as a story coordinator. And then you began writing from the show, and now I get to introduce you as being one of the co-producers. So do you want to speak about that journey for someone who's coming in at one stage of the game and then sees themselves, you know, becoming more integral to the process, actually?
Well, Graeme mentioned the CFC where the show was developed. I was not in the year that Graeme developed the show in, but I was in, I think, 1 or 2 years after that. And immediately after graduating from the CFC and hoping that I would, of course, land something somewhere, I heard that this crazy new show had been picked up about clones. And I'm like, that's perfect. I absolutely love science fiction. It was the kind of thing that wasn't really being done in Canada at that time. I begged my agent to get me an interview. That was where I met Graeme. And he liked my script enough that he said, we can't let you write. But you can learn what it is like to work in a writing room right out of the bat and learn how a show works. And after that, I stuck with the show. I wrote my first television script in the 2nd season, episode 6, I think, which is the one where Tat and Helena run off into the wild and fart intense. It's really awesome. Yeah.
Behind the curtain with Chris.
Yes. So it's the one where we meet the guy who created the clones, the progenitor of the project. But yeah, it was an amazing process. You know, I've learned a huge amount off this show. You know, it's not just it's a show where we are constantly being pushed to our limits to write around the conceit that Tat cannot actually physically be in a room with herself. So it's, you know, in every episode we have to do this backflip of how are we going to arrange it so that we have this scene where we do this amazing magic trick every time.
Wow.
So it's certainly been a huge learning process.
And one of the key things that you said was that you begged your agent. So everybody, for those of you who have agents, that works. Begging your agent gets you.
Yes.
Doesn't work for actors.
What do you mean, Kristian?
But also Chris is selling himself short because he was one of the hot new things out of the CFC program. We knew he was a writer that we needed to work with.
Well, thank you.
There you go. An assist from Kerry. Ari, Graeme mentioned you and Kerry mentioned you as the person that they knew they wanted even when they didn't know what they wanted. You came on board. How is it to play the spectrum that you have to sort of get your head and body and just mind around? What goes on for you, and how's the show been to you doing that?
I'll let you know when I find out. And certainly nothing that theater school will ever prepare you for. I mean, I came in season 2, and as far as I knew, I was in the first 6 episodes, and then you were going to write hopefully a great death for me. and then episode 6 came, and I wasn't dead. And then, you know, as the scripts started coming, I'm not dead, I'm not dead. And then I think we were about a week or two away from shooting 210, and I got a phone call from Graeme. And he said, how would you like to do this? And, I can't say no, but I don't know if I said anything. And so then all last season is...
Kind of a thud as you fainted.
I don't know. I can't remember, yeah. But, all last season is kind of a blur. And, as you're saying, it's just like you write, when you're in the writer's room, you're trying to figure out how you're going to create this scene and how is it going to be plausible. I mean, for me, the learning curve was... I think as an actor, you read the scene and you sort of figure out your character's journey within the scene and how it plays for the episode and the season as you know it. But the big learning curve for me was remembering that I had to plan the other side of the scene as well. So there were a couple times where I would just sort of be in, I guess, Rudy's frame of mind and be getting ready for that, and then we would shoot it, and then we would come back, and I was like, oh, I did not plan Seth at all. So I would have to rely on Nick Abraham, who played the clone double, to really shoulder the load and trust his abilities. And from there, it's just like, I don't know, winging it, but with a great person to shadow and watch, right, with Tat. But also just trust the writing and trust in yourself, and I don't know.
Well, those are all really good answers, actually.
Yeah.
I think that they speak to that key of how do you keep things delineated? You trust the writing. How do you keep people delineated? You trust your acting partner, and then you trust the crew and the creatives around you to put you in the best spot in that best moment, and then you trust post to capture your best moment on screen. I think
totally,
so, and that obviously works. Maria, what about you? The journey of Mrs. S and your personal journey in the show. We were talking backstage about what you have to do to be part of the show. Want to let the folks know a little bit about?
Well, Graeme said to me initially that his inspiration was Patti Smith for the character of Mrs. S. So I just said, well, I'm good. I'm in. And originally she was written as the part was British. It was a British actor. And so when I read for it, I had a British accent. And then I came over and we were just talking outside the reading room, the first read through. And Graeme and John both said, I really like your voice. Is there any reason can she be Irish? So suddenly she was Irish then, which is great. But I travelled over and back for the first 2 years, and then all my family relocated with me last year and this year for 6 months, which has been interesting. And we love it. It's like our second home now, so that's good. I tried the ice skating. I'm rubbish. And I've kind of made my peace with poutine, but
give it a shot. Come on.
Yeah. I think that the best thing for me about Mrs. S is that she's just complicated. She's real, she's good and bad and flawed, and she even got a chance to be sexy a couple of times. She sort of gets all these things to do, which is just really interesting. Often you read things and they might be an interesting character or a little bit of an interesting bit of a story, but it just is kind of one note, and you don't get a chance really to change or do anything else. And now, obviously, we're not doing anything like the workload that Tat or Ari are doing, but it's still, she's interesting. I never know what to expect, and that's fantastic. And also, the show loves women, and they consistently write parts for women who are different, and they're all kinds of different shapes and sizes and ages and intentions, and that's just it's a really nice place to work.
You're right. In this day and age where we hear so much about the topic of gender inequality and diversity on set and on screen is so loud in a very good way, but we have a show here that the iconic characters have that diversity. You find that, and in a way it's about what is same and what is diverse and what does that mean, and it really plays with that in a complex way. And it's nice to see that it's it's a Canadian creation in that way, because in Canada or Toronto, we kind of deal with that and live with it all the time.
I think it's really showing the rest of, pretty much everybody involved with the show, apart from me, is Canadian. Oh, and you. But I think it's really showing the world that what you make, what you create here is as good, if not better, than anything made anywhere else. I think I'm very proud of it. I think you should be.
Give it up.
It's really nice to play something other than the supporting or the day player. And this is the show that, for a lot of us Toronto actors, is we get to sink our teeth into something.
Yeah.
And it's it's just a testament to the quality of talent that Toronto has, and that they trust us to do it and not bring in the Canadian from LA.
Or the American from LA.
Or the American from LA.
Kristian, let's talk about, no disrespect to any Americans in the house, of course. We're not afraid of Americans.
And what are you going to say now when you move to LA and then you
when you become one?
Give me a job.
You're not coming back.
The Highland Garden somewhere. Kristian, Donnie Hendricks, we saw a little quick clip of what's happening, of that face. Want to tell us a little bit about your journey in terms of the show, the creation, and just how you feel you fit in and what's happening?
Sure. I've been very lucky in that I've grown into the show in what can only be described as an actor's dream. When I auditioned for it, and it was one audition, they'd been looking for the role for a while. My agent had wanted to get me in there, and I was doing a play at the time, and I wasn't available. And then finally, they were still looking for the role, and I was free to audition. So I went in, and I loved it. It was one of those things where we had opened the play, so my days were free, so I could actually audition for things, and we had shows at night, and I got the audition at like 5:30 the night before, and I had a play that night. I had a show that night at 8, and it was 3 scenes. I think it was like 8 to 10 pages, and so I just had to put it out of my mind and just go and do the play. And then afterwards, I went straight home and just kind of sat in my bed and read these crazy scenes. These crazy suburban scenes.
What were they? Do you remember?
They were it was initially, the first one was just like a little domestic spat between Allison and Donnie about the kids, and I'm rushing off to work. Sort of sets up the home life between this very suburban couple. Then the second scene was the argument that we have that's a little bit more heated about stuff not getting done because, unbeknownst to Donnie, Allison is kind of dealing with her own crazy crisis going on. Yeah, just a bit. And she ends the scene by smacking me with a golf club and knocking me out. And then the third scene is me tied to a chair being tortured with hot glue.
The glue gun.
The glue gun torture scene in the craft room of terror. So I had these crazy scenes that just like get more and more insane. And I had like no time to really work on them. But I think my acting muscles were in full mode, full blast mode, because I was doing this play and, I was just in shape for it. And so I went home, sat in bed, read these scenes, just tried to memorize them as quickly as possible and get a handle of what I'm doing in each scene. And really the next morning at like 10:30, I went in for the audition and just had them off book. I don't even think I had time to prep them with someone. I usually like to prep an audition with a friend or a teacher. And it was really like going by the gut. And but I connected with the character. I really loved the scenes. I thought it was so much fun. And I did a few sort of improv-y things in the audition that I hadn't prepared for. They just kind of happened. And one of them, I think, is what got me the job, because when I went on set and met the writers, they all loved a moment that I did in the audition. Oh, by the way, they all had mustaches. They had these really bad mustaches when I met them because they were growing mustaches for Movember.
It was Movember.
Yeah, except Karen Walton did not have a mustache. But I came into this room.
What a memory for you.
Yeah, it was just weird because I was all nervous going to set for my wardrobe fitting, and I go into the writer's room and everybody has these like really weak mustaches going on. Except Graeme. I mean, man can grow some facial hair.
He had a proper angle going on.
But so in the scene where I'm tied up and being tortured, when we got to the moment where she starts dripping hot glue on my bare chest and I start screaming, I guess I improv'd in the, because I didn't plan it, I improv'd as soon as the hot wax hits my chest, I started trying to blow it out as if it was on fire, going,
All right.
and just like screaming, and they really got a kick out of that. So maybe that was the only moment that got me the job. But I was lucky. I
All it
lucked
takes
out.
is one, right?
Yeah.
We had looked for a long time. We'd looked for a long time.
Yeah, that's
We'd
true,
gone
yeah.
out 5 or 6 times, and we were just giving up and going to go with someone we didn't really want. And then you came along.
Well, thanks for picking me. Yeah, and we didn't know if it was going to be 3 episodes or 6 episodes in the season. They didn't really fully know what Donnie's involvement was going to be, and then I just had a blast on set. Graeme made me feel part of the team right away. Like, do you remember you walked me through the set, introduced me to everybody, and then you walked me over to the set for our house in the suburbs, our backyard, and we just stood in the studio, and I just remember just being in love with everything. And just looking up to the ceiling and just seeing, way, way above us. We're standing in a backyard, in a building, and way above are the lights, but it's dark because they're not using that studio. And I just stood on the back patio of this house with Graeme, and you just talked to me about the character and what's going on in the suburbs, and I just felt really at home immediately. And then, you start to feel like a part of a family, like I'd never felt really with another show, and then it just kind of grew from there.
You did that for me as well. I've just remembered, and it's such a kind thing to do, actually. The first day that I arrived, Graeme as well walked me around all the different sets, and I remember I arrived in your house, and I was just like, oh, I really want a craft room. I could just see these
Everybody
ribbons
says
everywhere.
that.
I know, you're just like, oh. But something we were laughing about the thing, and I burst out laughing, and then realized that they were filming. And I was just like, oh, cut to Maria gets fired before she's even shot anything.
But that's a testament to the show and how the show is run and how we approach it, even as actors, and we're welcoming someone who's a day player or a guest star. It comes from the top, and it comes from Graeme and John and Tat especially.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because I've always been scared of showrunners. I'm not as much anymore, but I used to be so scared of them. They hold all the power, and you just like have these awkward conversations, and they're probably used to having actors come up to them and just trying to buddy with them so they get a better part or something like that. But
I wish.
But you know what? They make
Note
you
to
feel
actors:
welcome.
be better buddies with showrunners. Or try
Always.
to be.
But like we try and welcome people, and Tat sets that example. She does such a good job of just being open to everybody who comes on set, whether they're a one-line role or even a background performer or anybody. She is just gracious and warm and welcoming, and that's such a huge thing. And I think that's a Canadian thing, because I think we've worked with on American productions before where you have a number 1 or a number 2 on the show, and they just don't have any time for anybody, and they don't talk to anybody, and they just sit there on their phone, and it makes a weird, uncomfortable feeling on set, and that comes across in the scenes if everybody isn't connected and comfortable and relaxed and doing their best work. If you're creating an environment that's not good to work in, the end product on camera or on screen, the audience is going to pick up on it not being that good.
Right.
Something's off. There's no chemistry.
Yeah, and I think that's further about acting, about what you were asking about preparing and things. I mean, well, you prepare by learning your lines. Like, there's no excuse for showing up and not knowing what you're supposed to be saying, first of all. But after that, most acting is not acting. It's not acting alone. It's reacting. Whatever happens between the people who are in the scene together. So if you're closed to that, you're going to lose half of what's possible, at least half of what's possible, if not more.
Yeah. We've heard the word suburbs, we've heard Canada, Canadian proud, we see cityscapes when we see the show. It's interesting for, I know, our team at the City of Toronto, at City Hall, to talk about what makes Toronto a desirable place, what makes a desirable place to shoot. And you get a lot of traditional answers and worries that Toronto always plays other cities. Well, let's be honest, when you go to New York or Chicago, frankly, shows that are being shot there are also, they're playing each other's cities. No one would ask New York, I don't think, or Chicago would never wonder or be worried about them playing another city and worried that they would lose their own identity. But in Toronto, in Canada, we always do. And yet, whenever we talk to actors or executive producers or showrunners that Toronto's such a valued place for the very fact that of congeniality and people are getting along and there's so much diversity. So can you guys, anyone or all of you, speak about what Toronto means to the show as a character? Is it a character, or how has it grown for you, or has it?
Well, it's a great place for us to film, but it's an interesting story because obviously BBC America were very integral to, pushing the show forward, and we got our Canadian partner secondary. It was very important to the American broadcaster that actually it was a generic North American city at first, and it was only their second original program, and they really wanted it to compete on the world stage as a good show and not a good Canadian show. So we actually, in the first season, encountered a few kind of problems where we did have to really hide that it was Toronto. We weren't allowed to show the CN Tower. We had to recut some scenes to take out streetcars, Canadian money, etc.
American money. We need American money.
Yeah.
You could only show the money from the side.
And we had to choose
try
the
doing
20s.
a back alley drug deal with only show the money.
Wait till
from
you
the
have
side.
women on the notes, then.
They didn't want us to particularly name Canadian cities, etc., etc. And so it was and even say it was Canada. But then, of course, as the show succeeded in the second season, the cat was out of the bag, and that was part of its draw and part of its promotional kind of capacity as well, and why it was talked about. So they really kind of eased up on that afterwards. But we still don't actually say it's Toronto.
Well,
or do we?
I mean,
I don't think we
now
ever
we're like, hey, can you just reframe it a little bit to get the CN Tower in there?
All of those rules have gone.
They
so
are.
we've just,
They really are gone.
Yeah.
Like we in the first year we celebrated when we snuck a streetcar into a scene.
Yeah. Because they haven't noticed because they're actually just more interested in the drama on screen, not looking for Canadian.
I think we name neighborhoods, but not the city. We talk about.
So as things have relaxed, now we do have characters from Montreal, and we've named different suburbs, and we've now kind of crept in the Canadianness actually. So it's kind of changed.
That's just a development of the show, and it's a very Canadian concept. Relaxed is what you said, and that's a very Canadian thing.
I feel like Toronto has gone through a few phases, whereas in the 90s it was very much playing New York a lot, playing Chicago, playing American cities. In the early 2000s it was playing Toronto, and it was very obvious Toronto was stamped on everything that was coming out of here. And it was selling in the U.S. But I feel like now we've got to a point where we don't have to just preach our identity. We are finally learning who we are as a city, and we're just presenting it. We don't have to stamp it with Toronto everywhere. We can just be Toronto.
I think it's a kind of, we would have the same thing would go on in Ireland as well. I think it's a kind of post-colonial mentality.
It is,
where
isn't it?
you look for outside validation until you get to a place of confidence where you're like, well, I don't need that anymore. This is just where it is and what it is. I think as an outsider coming in, I have found a great value in the welcome. I like it enough that I moved my whole family over here last year and this year, and the kids go to school, and I really appreciate the diversity and the safety of the city for me and my family. That's fantastic. But also think from filming here, what you mentioned earlier, one of you, that there's just an extraordinary pool of talented actors to draw from. I go to the theatre all the time when I'm here, and I'm constantly astonished at the incredible level of skill and performance that I see. And I keep meeting all these amazing people who rock up on the show, Tom McCannis and Kyra Harper, and yada yada. We could go on and on, but it's just so. Why would you not film somewhere where you have all those that amazing talent?
Yeah.
Maria knows more about Toronto than any of us does.
Yeah, but it's true.
She culturally took the city apart within her first year of being here.
But I don't know if you remember, Graeme, but when we were actually presenting our package to BBC America and gunning for our green light, we really had to prove to them the depth of talent out of Canada, actually. And I remember doing lists and lists of proven and up-and-coming Canadians hidden around the world, and Canadians in LA, and just as part of the package, because we were educating them on the talent pool. And again, as a British producer coming here, that was one of my greatest surprises, was going to auditions for other projects that I was on. I just couldn't believe the standard of the acting here. It was brilliant. So I could genuinely kind of make that argument too, because I'd been so impressed.
Perfect. But you've also taken chances with nobodies, like myself and like Ari,
That's just because we didn't have any money.
No, fair enough. Well, then I'm so glad about that.
Wasn't about your audition, buddy.
But that's the joy of the show, and I think it's been great that we have been able to get some kind of stunt casting in there as well, and get some names in there. But really, we've just always had the philosophy that we want to cast right for the role, and sometimes you're hamstrung if you go for a kind of named actor and you can't actually option them for the next season, and you can't tell the story you wanted to tell. And again, just the confidence over the years we've had with our broadcasters, they've let us do that now. I think at first they had a mandate; they wanted us to, and of course, for promotion of the show, they need something that's buzzworthy.
Of course, yeah.
But actually, the show kind of became the buzzworthy
Which is
part of
that's the greatest thing that a show can do is become its own selling feature rather than having any stunts. We're going to about wrap up so that we can give these folks a chance to get at you. But I wanted to talk to, again, one or all, depending on how much time we have, but any memories from season 4 that you want to drop here, or any, without spoilers, any sort of teasers that you want to let us know about? Anyone?
Sure. It's funny. My best memory of this year was a crisis we had on set. We were all freezing out in the middle of a field, and Tat was just about to shoot a scene, and she came up to me and said, "I don't think this science thing makes any sense." And I said, "No, I think it's okay. It's okay." So she goes off, and about 5 minutes later, she comes back, and she's got our science consultant on the phone, and she says, "Your science consultant says it doesn't make any sense." And so I get on the phone with the science consultant, and we have like seconds to figure this thing out, and I'm rewriting the script as we do it. And then I gave her the new lines, and she's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I think that makes sense." And then she says that. And what was great about it was all of us working together to come up with a solution to something, a mistake, admittedly, I made in the first place, but something that I felt like we were all really pushing through it, and it in the end, it made it better. So
that's a really nice memory, because it also speaks about the relationship that a writer and actor can have. And I'll be honest, having been on a lot of sets in my time, that's not always what you find, that kind of relationship where an actor can say just before someone yells action, "By the way, your science is wrong."
But not even
in
to
the science
correct
show.
them. Not even to correct them,
Yes.
but just having them accessible. Like
Yes.
this is truly a writer's show, which is really cool to see, because I've worked on other shows where you never see the writer on set at all. It's like they produce a script and then they're still in the writer's room or wherever. But the writer of that episode is always on set with us and is always, just right next to the director.
And
they
approachable,
Yeah, and like I've seen the directors turn to the writer and go, "Is this what you're thinking? Is this what you had in mind?" And I've also seen the writer either agree or been like, "Oh, well, I actually kind of saw it like this." And he's like, "Okay, let's shoot it that way as well." So we have that. So it's very much a writer show. And I've gone up to, like, Kate Melville. We had to figure out a line in an episode this season, and it was a last-minute thing, too. Like, oh, God, what can we say here that might work a little bit better? And they're approachable like that. So it's, like, truly a team effort that's just so much fun to work with, because it's rare to find that. It's great.
It is. It's rare. And with that, not to cut you folks off, but I'm going to let these folks get a chance and ask you a few questions. So let's open it up to the floor. I think there's microphones. There's folks. There you are, waving. There you are.
I got a question right here.
You can ask it.
Okay. For the creators of the show, I'm wondering if you could speak about what has the success of Orphan Black, what has it done for being able to do certain types of shows with Canadian broadcasters and American networks? Like, has it sort of opened up people's sort of, imaginations as to what kind of shows could be done through Canadian companies?
Yeah, I mean, it really did put Temple Street on the map, which was great. It just gives you that level of, auspices, I guess is the new word. So it's been good for us. And, the company has been evolving. I think it breaks a lot of rules, and I think it's just been a nice kind of, it was a kind of beginning of a bit of change in Canada, really. And there's been a few shows where I think, I've heard broadcasters talk about how great it is to just greenlight something that is just not as traditional or derivative as the stuff that Canada has been known for. I mean, 19.2 on Bravo and a bit more kind of cable-led shows. For us, it's definitely opened doors, and we're developing a lot of more serialized shows, and just because we have the confidence to be able to kind of convince people that we can pull it off, and that everything doesn't have to have a kind of formulaic, episodic engine. And so yeah, it's been great.
Thank you.
And then for the actors or for John and I too, when we go to LA now, it's a whole different story. People are actually like they know the show. Yeah. And I think that we're kind of a mystery to them. They're like, who are you people up there? What are you doing? How does this come out of there? How do you do it? And then but it has opened a lot of doors for the creatives on the show. For instance, Michael Mando is on Better Call Saul. There's been other people who've really.
Dylan Bruce is.
Yeah,
Dylan's got a huge pilot right
Heroes,
now, and he's
yeah.
also got another series that's filming up here in Toronto right now.
Yeah.
And also for Tatiana's career as well. She's
Of
going
course,
on to
yeah.
film. I'm not sure if we're allowed to say, but
She's a little bit too busy to do anything else, though, and so are John and I. So we'll see. We'll have to finish it first.
Yeah. But it's funny because when I go down to LA and meet the broadcasters like you do, they all say, why didn't you bring us that show? We'd love to do a show like Orphan Black. And I'm like, we did bring it to you and you passed.
I think something that we didn't really get to yet, though, as well, that we didn't mention is that for ages, John and Graeme used to call it the little show that could, or the little show that did. But the thing that really propelled it from season 1 was fans got hold of it, like a fan base found it and loved it, and they just really propelled it forward and spread it. It's just one of those things you can't legislate for, and then when it happens, it's really rare kind of magic.
Nice. Other questions? There you go.
Hello.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask, with it being such, like you were saying, it's such a writer's show, and with the writers being so accessible, how much of the show is kind of like, okay, by season 4 we want to be here, by season 5 we want to be here, and how much of it is kind of like, okay, well, let's see how it goes, and like the actors and how they do with the other actors, like kind of guiding it through that way, and like how does that play into like making sure the science is right and all that stuff?
It's one of the it's one of the real balancing acts of any serialized show, really. We've had a broad general sense of where the show would end, and then each year you never really know whether you're going again, so we just try and drive the season right up to like some horrifying climax with numerous cliffhangers that no network could possibly cancel. But we begin, and Chris can speak to this too, we begin each year with a lot of lead time for the writers, a good 3 months before we even start prep. And we look at the show, the series as a whole, and then we look at the season as a whole, and each character what is each character's journey going to be this season, and what is the season about? What's the scientific element of the mystery this year? What are we going to sort of hold a mirror up to in our sci-fi world?
Yeah, I kind of think of it like Lord of the Rings. We know we're going to Mount Doom. It's how we get there. That's the challenge. And when it comes to the science, I've in the room, sometimes they call me the junior science officer. I have a close relationship with Graham's close friend, Cosima Herder, who our Cosima, of course, is modeled after. And she keeps us leveled and grounded when it comes to the reality of the science. And of course, that often presents more story problems than it solves. Trying to keep anything close to reality on a science fiction show is the ongoing challenge. But we've managed to work it out so far. And I think that, by trying to hew close to something that's plausible, it tends to give us, in the end, more story and more options, and because we haven't totally divorced ourselves from reality. So, if that makes sense.
Thanks. We've got time for one more question, I think. So if you're burning, yearning, make it happen now. Here comes the microphone.
Thanks. As far as the death ray aimed at an actor is concerned over the course of a season. How does an actor manage to get your finger off the trigger? Like, what is it? Is it the performance? Is it audience response?
I can answer this one. I was supposed to kill Ari. Yeah, the mandate in season 2 was that Mark was going to die at the hands of Paul in episode 6. And of course, as Graeme said, we have lots and lots of lead time when we write. And of course, we were coming up with these stories before Ari had been cast, before a lot of these, but before we started seeing dailies and started shooting, and just the season was taking shape. And of course, as we got closer and closer to the day of Mark's death, we realized that this guy was too compelling, and we just, we wanted to keep him around. He was a really interesting, complicated villain. And Ari just won us over, and ultimately that saved him from being murdered by Paul.
I think Allison might have, we might have considered Allison killing her husband in season 1 too, but the same. I think Kristian won us out.
Yeah, you're off the hook for now, Kristian.
It's the underwear, isn't it?
But one thing is we're particularly John Fawcett. We're very, very particular in casting. We spent a lot of time on those decisions. And I can honestly say that this show has never done what happens a lot, I think, which is the showrunners or the producers or the network goes, we don't like that character, we don't like that actor, kill him. We have never done that. We have never taken, or otherwise removed a cast member for performance reasons, which is, I think that's a real.
There have been, we have to say though, because it sounds like maybe, there are some incredible people who've been in the show who have died, and it's not because they're crap, Definitely not.
Listen, thank you very much, Graeme, Chris, Kerry, Maria, Ari, Kristian, for this conversation. Having it with each other, with me, and I think with the audience has been a real treat, especially one as we celebrate Canadian Screen Week and all the success of this show, not only in Canada but around the world. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. And here's to the hosts and sponsors too. Have a great Canadian Screen Week.